This is September 18th, 1985. This is Joe Todd, and interview with Mrs. Catharine May Carlin in Picher, Oklahoma. Ma'am, where were you born?
I was born in Johnstown, Missouri.
And when's your birthday?
October the 22nd. I was born in 1913.
1913. Who's your father?
Ed O. Edwards.
And your mother?
Dessa Edwards.
What was her maiden name?
Edwards.
How long did you live in Missouri?
I lived in Missouri, well, till I was 2 years old.
Mm-hmm. When you were 2, where'd the family move?
We lived in Johnstown till I was 2, and then we moved to Webb City.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we left Webb City, I was 6 years old.
What type of work did your father do?
He was a teamster. He hauled the lead and zinc with a wagon and a team.
When did he begin work in the mines?
My father worked in the mines in Galena, Kansas when he was just a young man.
Did he start out as a teamster?
No, he worked in a smelter at Galena, and he worked in the mines.
Mm-hmm. Did you know your grandparents?
Yes, they were farmers.
Were either one of your grandfathers in the Civil War?
No, not that I know of.
Okay, thank you.
How long do these interviews take?
The average interview is an hour. We have some as short as 15 minutes. Some we have 6 hours.
Okay.
And where did you start school?
I started the school at the Eugene Field School in Webb City,
Now, Webb City, that's in
Missouri.
Missouri. And how many years did you go there?
Well, I went there about, kindergarten through the 2nd grade. That would be about 3 years, wouldn't it? And when we moved down here, school wasn't in session then, but when it started, I went to the 3rd grade. And I went to it was a school building that isn't there anymore. It was called the Twin Schools, and it was 2 buildings built just like 2-story buildings. And there was so many children here in Picher. Then some of the rooms we had to set 2 to a desk. And I sat with another girl in one of those little tiny school desks for the 3rd grade.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had a school, same type building, out here, let's see, where would it be now? It's gone now. Where Naomi Poole lives, right down here in the big white house. She bought the old building and built her house out of it. And I went there to the 6th grade. Then I went over to the high school, where the high school is now, for 7th, and we graduated out of the 9th grade then. They don't do that anymore.
No. How big was Picher in those years?
I couldn't tell you. I don't remember.
Mm-hmm.
But I know when we first moved down here, when my mother took me, it got so bad because it was there was many holes in the ground. There was air holes all over this ground, so as they learned how to clear the air and to have cleaner places for the men to work, and they wouldn't have to work in so much dust. They that's how come this old water could get in to our water, you know. And then that's the reason they plugged up so many of the holes. And then when the mines quit pumping the water out of the ground, the bad water out of the ground, so they could keep everything dry, and as it gradually filled up again, when the mines shut down and the pumps shut down, there was a chemical reaction in that mine water from the minerals in the ground, and it causes an acid of some kind, and this acid pollutes our water. And according to what they say, it's toxic. I mean, it's not good to drink or use for anything, and it turns everything just a little rusty red. A chemist could tell you what the reaction is. I can't. But it's a chemical reaction from the water. Of course, that's pure water here in this camp. But that was when the mines helped keep the ground clear of the mine water. And a lot of mills use chemicals to when they separated the ore from the rock, you know, and the lead from the rock. They use some kind of chemicals on their tables, and that went into the water too, on top of the ground.
Yeah.
Sort of a harness, and when they fastened this harness up to the cable to let them down, it was like they were sitting in a swing with their limbs sticking out like this, and they just let them down in the shaft like that. And
He said that they took the trucks in sections down.
yeah, they did. And
What's causing all the cave-ins?
oh, I really don't know. I couldn't tell you. It's a way on top of the ground. You know, this what we call chat pile, gravel pile over here at the big mill. It got so heavy over there, it just caved in the middle. It fell through, and a big part of it filled up the ground underneath.
How much of this area is undermined?
Well, I don't have any miles. My father, not too many years before he died, he worked as what that lady in the paper called a mule skinner. He took care of the mules in the ground, and he didn't do it all the time, but he could go down in one shaft and walk clear from the east side of town to the west side of town to another place where they worked, and come up out of the shaft on the west side of town. He didn't do that often because he said there's places where he had to duck down and crawl through, but he could do it.
How long did your father work in the mines?
Really, let's see. He started working in the mines when he was about 15 years old, I guess, and he was 54 when he died. But he didn't work in the mines.
Now, did he have that silicosis?
Yes.
What exactly is it?
What?
What exactly is that silicosis?
It causes an acid in their lungs, and it eats their lungs away, and they just hemorrhage their lungs out of their chest cavity. And as long as they I've seen miners live for years and years, and you think they was gonna leave any time, but they'd have one large artery, or maybe on one side or the other, they'd keep alive.
Was it painful?
Yeah. The hemorrhages were painful. And, but, they had to have long rest and nourishing food.
So the silicosis is just, that just a rock dust that,
Yeah.
so it's kind of like black lung in the coal miners.
Yeah. And some of them had caused, dust caused kind of like an emphysema. They could breathe in the air, but they couldn't push it out. You know, emphysema. It covers up the lungs. And I've worked in the museum during 3 reunions, and I like it when I work downtown because I can see a lot of people that come back here that I knew when I was a girl. And I saw one fellow that I went to school with out here in Wentworth School, and he said, "I'll see you next year." And I said, "Okay." And next year I looked for him and looked for him and looked for him. But I wondered why he didn't come back to the reunion, because he said he was going to. And he had died during the meantime. But he didn't have lung trouble, but he didn't have good health because he worked in mines while he was a boy. And
So I guess most of the miners, they wind up with some sort of lung trouble then.
well, most of them did, but a lot of them just had bad health where other things but some of them weathered through it.
The water, are all of these lines now filled up with water? Oh, is it a yucky looking water by
Yeah.
now? Is it a?
Yeah. And you've seen the water set in an old rusty bucket? Well, now that's just the way it looks. It comes out of the ground, just looks like water is set in an old rusty bucket, and all of our lines are filled up with a lot of rust because rust gets into our drinking water. And,
I saw the news where they drilled some new wells here.
yeah, we're hoping that we'll find good water.
It was on television a few weeks ago about your water totally being shut down, they had hauled into you.
Yeah.
So you said that the town of Picher was condemned in the 40s?
I don't remember what year that was, Mr. Fox. I can't remember what year it was condemned. I'm going to sit down because I got arthritis.
I've really messed up. Thank you all for letting me just stand around.
Oh, well, that's just fine.
I've enjoyed
Put your
it.
name down there on the book.
It's so rare we ever get just a chance to stop and to take something in. Usually we're in such a hurry and going and going.
Mm-hmm.
Now what's your name again?
Sally Lewis,
And you work with Southwestern Bell?
Yellow Pages.
Yellow Pages.
Well, see, it's all separate now.
Oh, it is? Oh.
The telephone company is a company, Southwestern Bell Telephone, Southwestern Bell Publications, and we are truly a separate
Why did they
entity.
split everything up?
The government. Bell didn't want AT&T. Who said AT&T?
Yes, ma'am.
Anyway, it was enjoyable. It was open and
Yeah.
just good to meet you. And
Thank you.
whatever you're doing, what are you doing?
Well, I'm
Come to
the,
think about it, what are you
I'm
doing?
the oral historian for the state. How come your family moved to Picher?
My father worked down here, and he worked for the St. Louis Mining and Smelter Company. We say Hall Jack. That's name for the zinc ore is jack. And we didn't have a car, and my father had to drive the team back and forth from Picher to Webb City, and it took so long then. And so he decided we should move down here because most of his work was here. The man he worked for had an office in Webb City, but he got his orders for down here, and he would go around the mills and sample the ore and take the samples back up to the man he worked for, and the man would decide whether to buy the ore or not. And sometimes he took, they had several assay offices here, and he'd take the samples to the assay office, and if the assay turned out good, why, he could phone his boss and find out whether to buy the ore or not. And so we moved down here in the first house. We moved in, I was supposed to have a screened-in porch with no screen on it, and the wallpaper was falling off of the walls, and the water we had in was from an old-fashioned outside faucet coming up through the floor over an old rusty sink. And but a place to live was hard to find then.
What year did you move to Picher? What year did you move to Picher?
I'm not for sure. I think about 1920. Put 1920.
Yeah. How'd you move to Picher? How'd you travel?
Oh, we moved in with the wagon.
With the wagon?
Yeah.
How long did that trip take from Webb City down
Oh, I imagine my dad made a couple of trips to bring furniture. We lived in a four-room house in Webb City, and but it took us a large part of the day to move a wagon load of furniture and enough to be able to stay all night down here for my dad to go back and pick up the rest of our belongings.
What do you remember about the duties of the Teamster? What did your father do for the mines?
Oh, he usually, when he didn't have a team of his own, he took care of the teams of other people, and we usually had a barn with room for a couple of teams, and he'd board somebody else's horses and take care of them. My dad was real fond of horses, and he always took good care of them. Well, most Teamsters did, because their job depended on whether their horses were able to work, and so they took care of their horses like some people take care of their cars.
Yeah. So whenever he would haul the ore from the mine, he hauled it to where?
Oh, he put it in the boxcar.
To the railroad.
And he usually called the railroad. There was a certain station that he'd call and tell them he needed 100. I don't know what that meant, but he'd either say, I need a 50 or 100 car, and it'd be stationed at a certain place. He'd have them bring it to a certain place.
Mm-hmm.
And of course it'd be as close as to the mine that he was going to haul the ore from. And he usually had a helper, and then sometimes they'd hire the young boys to what they call back jack in the cars. The men would throw the jack up into the doorway, and the boys would pick it up and so on, and keep a place
Mm-hmm.
empty there for the fellows to put a load of ore in. And it usually took a good 8-hour day
Yeah.
to load it ore.
Mm-hmm. Picture the 1920s. Did you bob your hair in the 20s?
Oh, I always had short hair.
Always had short hair?
I never did let my hair grow long.
Did you wear the short skirts?
Oh, no. No, I didn't wear, my mother died, and I was 16 when my mother died, and she wouldn't let me wear short skirts. We were laughing one day, some of the women and I, at what we had to wear to school.
What did you have to wear to school?
Oh, in the wintertime, we had to wear rubber boots and long underwear, and I hated those things. But we didn't have sidewalks, very many sidewalks, and and I hated those rubber boots. And that was the first thing my mother bought me before school year, was a pair of rubber boots. And oh, they were heavy and hard to walk in, and I didn't like them. Oh, I didn't want to move down to Picher. I didn't. I liked it up at Weber City, because we lived in a nice neighborhood up there. And after we moved down here, this is old Eugene Field School that I went to. There I am right there.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
See, I had short hair. Mother never would let me go barefoot. I did around home sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
but she wouldn't let me go barefoot like the rest of the kids.
How did the Depression affect the mines, 1930s?
Well, it caused a lot of people to move away because prices of ore and lead got so low that even the gougers didn't, what we call gougers, that just went down and dug out a little bit for themselves, and maybe they'd have a little mill set up outside and on top of the ground, and they'd lease their gouge from the Eagle Picher. And there still may be a mine running over at Quapaw, I don't know. It was until not long ago, but a lot of people moved away.
Did the mine start closing in the Depression?
Yes,
Did the mines close because the orders ran out, or what?
Well, at first, the mines closed because the price of zinc and lead went down. Usually, when the price of lead stayed up pretty good, the mines would stay open, even though they weren't getting very much for zinc ore. And, they quit using zinc for so many manufactured things like tubs and buckets, and my husband and I ran a hardware store down here, and it was hard to get zinc buckets whenever we put in our store. We put in our store in the late 40s, and you just didn't get a lot of things made out of zinc because plastic was popular. The hard plastic come in, but of course lead is still pretty precious because they use lead for batteries and a lot of things. And but the mines finally just ran out, though, as far as that's concerned.
Yeah. When did you get married?
But,
When did you get married?
oh gosh, I'd have to think. I got married in 32
32.
on New Year's Eve day. Mr. Carlin passed away though in 72. Well, when we were married, he worked in a little hardware store here in Picher, and he was sort of a self-taught electronics engineer, I guess. He worked on anything electric, and he worked on the radios, and, well, he worked on everything. He worked on washing machines, and when the refrigerators came in, he worked on the electric refrigerators. He regassed them, and they don't do that anymore, but they did then. And then he quit the hardware store though, and he and his brother had a radio called a Picher radio shop down here. And during the war, my husband had diabetes, and they wouldn't accept him in the military service, and his brother had a bad arm, and they wouldn't accept him. And they were needing men at that time to work in some of the mills that were still left during the war. They opened up the mills quite a bit during the war. They had been shut down because they needed the material that the mills put out, and a lot of them reran their chat files because a lot of dirt that they'd missed, sometimes they grabbed up in some of these ponds around here, it was heavy and it drifted down to the edge of the chat file, and a lot of that silt in the bottom of the pond had lead and zinc in it. And so there was one place at Carlin that stayed open during the war. It shut down shortly after the war ended. But my husband's brother worked there. Then my husband worked over at the, while they still had the shop, Kenneth worked at the mill, and his wife and I, my sister-in-law and I, stayed down at the radio shop, and we took in the radios that needed working on and whatever needed fixing. And my husband had come home from his job at the flying field over at Miami, where they trained the English pilots. And he worked on the transmitters and the receivers in the plane.
Now, was this at the airport in Miami? And they were training English pilots?
Did you know that? I thought everybody knew that. They've had some English boys reunions over there in Miami. They sure have. And there's a whole lot of them that was killed over here in accidents while he's learning to fly. That are buried over at the cemetery at Miami. The lady doesn't live anymore. She died a year or so back. But there was one elderly lady that decorated the English boys' graves every Memorial Day. And there was always a story in the paper about it. And after the war, there was a few private planes out there, but they don't use the airport much anymore. But my husband worked over there, I don't know, a couple of years or 3.
And he worked on the radios?
Yes, He worked on the intercoms in the big, they had 2 or 3 big buildings there. And
what did you do on VJ Day, the day the war ended?
Always, we were down at the store. By that time we'd put the hardware store in. My husband's brother and he put the store in together. And we heard the awfulest noise, and there was a string of cars coming down the street. and everybody was just making the most noise and blowing horns and hooping and hollering. And and we went outside and stood outside of the store and watched everybody go by. We finally realized the war was over.
What did you think about the bomb?
Well, I thought it was a terrible thing to do. I really did. I felt sorry for the men that dropped it. I felt so sorry for all those people. And it was a terrible thing to do, I think. But maybe that's what it took to wake some people up over there. I don't know, but I just had a sad reaction to the dropping of the bomb.
You think it ended the war quicker?
I believe it did. I believe it did. The street was a real busy street, and I can remember when we first moved down here, when my mother would go shopping on Saturday night, the streets would just be filled with people. And you could hardly get down the street, and Mom would say, "Hold on to my dress, Catherine, hold on to my dress," and I'd hold on to her skirt so I could stay with her and not get lost. She was afraid I'd get lost. But I don't believe you had to worry about children then like you do now. And Picher was a wild, wild town.
It was.
Many
saloons here in town?
What?
There were many saloons here in town?
Oh, yeah. But there was a lot of places around town you could get liquor. There wasn't a saloon. And if we passed a place where there's a lot of cars all parked around an old house, you know, an old unpainted house or something like that, Mom would say, "I bet they're selling the home brew there." And 9 times out of 10 they were. Because that's why some of the old miners made their living after they got in bad health and couldn't work. And
There were many moonshiners around here that made moonshine?
well, not that I know of, but I could hear people talking about it. And after Merle and I had been married a while, there was a fellow lived out on our street that was a county sheriff for a while, and I used to go with he and his wife. She canned a lot, and we'd go get apples down here at some of these farms that raised apples and peaches and raised fruit. And while we was out driving around, why, Mr. Stanley, he'd just be watching and looking around, you know. I'd say, "Ben, what are you looking for?" He said, "I'm looking for a moonshiner." And he used those buying trips to look for moonshiners, and that was in the 30s. And he found a lot of them too, I think. His name was Ben Stanley. I think he's dead now.
Well,
I didn't tell you very much, I guess.
yeah.
But
Anything else about Picher you can remember about the early days?
well, I know everything was always crowded. Stores were crowded, and when you went to town on Saturday night to buy groceries, the man at the grocery store would always give the children a sack of candy. You went in and paid your bill, and they'd give you a sack of candy. And I remember the first church I went to down here was First Baptist Church, and we went to church in a little frame building, and we didn't have regular pews to sit on. They were benches made out of, looked like about 2 by 4 or 6s.
What church was that?
First Baptist Church.
First Baptist.
The first church here was non-denominational, called the Union Church, and the preacher was, what was his name? Post, Reverend Post. But our preacher that was at our church was Reverend Paul Ellis from Webb City. And he either drove down or come down with a streetcar. I remember when we had streetcars here, and when I was a girl. And we had a little station out here on A Street where a car came from Columbus to meet the Miami car and bring people from the north of us up here. And then they could catch a car here at this little station and go on to Miami if they wanted to. And then this church right over here, the Nazarene Church, was called the Joplin Junction, and the streetcar ran between here and Joplin. And sometimes you didn't have to change cars to go on up to Webb City.
Yeah. Were the streets paved in Picher?
I can't remember when we had the first paved street, but when we moved here, we just about had sidewalks, but no paving, and it was muddy, and that's the reason we had to wear rubber boots. Everybody wore boots.
Oh, yeah. Okay. What else can we talk about?
Well, as long as we had a good number of people living here, we had good schools. Well, we got good schools now, but we just don't have very many people here. And our school enrollment is low. And we had a school building out here that I told you about, and the twin schools, and we had one at Cardin, and we had one out here on the hill called Mineral Heights Hill. That's on 12th Street, East 12th Street. And it was so hard. One of the superintendents decided that it cost so much to keep all these buildings up that they decided to consolidate the school, and they got government help and built the new, I say new, it isn't new now, but the elementary school building out here close to the high school. Have you seen it?
No.
And
Well, I think we have a good interview.
but like I said, we've been through some terrible crises. And
Do you remember the big strike?
oh yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, during the strike,
What year was that?
I'm sorry, I don't remember. But during the strike, there was a man that some official in the union ran off with the money, and there wasn't any money left for anything. And some of the fellows wanted to go back to work. And some of them did go back to work, but there was a lot of trouble because the pickets didn't want to let them pass the picket line. And any place that was trying to work, well, they'd picket. And so they formed a new union called the Blue Card Union, and it was the ones that wanted to go back to work. And they were having so much trouble among themselves, among the two factions, that at one time they had what they called a pick annual parade here, and they marched around town, a great group of men, I don't know how many, carrying pick handles. I guess they just dared anybody to bother them.
Why were they carrying pick handles?
Because a lot of them that went back to work had been beat up, and some of their homes had been damaged, and mostly the men that wanted to go back to work were the ones that had families and children to feed and send to school, and that's what I remember about the strike.
Or did they stop the strike then? The ones that went back to work?
Well, it shut the mines down for so long that they finally come to some kind of a solution, I guess, so the mines would start back up. I never really truly knew what happened, but there was enough men that went back to work that they started the mines back up, but they kept the union.
They did.
Yeah, but the fellows that had blue cards, though, they carried them the rest of their lives, I guess. This union, what was that union boss that everybody disliked so? Well, there was one man that this union joined up with that everybody didn't like around here. I can't think what that man's name was. And but it just finally flittered out, of course, when the mines shut down. But it might have unionized other places or businesses, I don't know. But a lot of our people went out to Grants, New Mexico, to the uranium mines when our mines shut down. They made good money out there.
You all ever consider going to Grants, New Mexico for that? You and your husband? You ever thought about going?
No, no, we stayed here.
How many grandkids you have? How many kids and grandkids?
I have two boys, and one boy has a boy and a girl, and one of my boys has a little girl. I have 3 grandchildren. My boys are adopted, they're twins. They don't look like twins, though. They don't hardly look like brothers.
What else you want to talk about?
That's all I'm going to talk about. What do you want to talk about?
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
If that'll do any good.
Oh, yeah.